Alright, so first off, I'd like to start the video by apologizing for the poor audio and camera work, but I'm making this video in response to a video that was made years ago stating that you could simply swap out the heel release on this Walther P5 with one from a P38 and use P38 magazines without issue. Now that ended up not being completely true, although it does work of a fashion. There are a couple issues, specifically with my Walther P5. Now I know there are different variants that were imported here into the US. Mine happens to be, I guess, a version 4. And so I had to add this sort of little rubber gasket here that's approximately about 3 mils to prevent this from hitting the extractor. I don't know if you can see it here. I'm trying to get it against the white background here. Let me see if I can prop this up a little bit better. There we go. And so there, you can see that little blade that sort of juts out. If I can get this correct. Apologies again for the less than ideal camera work. Let me see if I can. There we go. Maybe. Alright. So there, against the white background, you can kind of see that blade that sort of juts out, right? Right about here. And so a standard magazine, standard P5 magazine, will simply, let me see if I can turn this a little bit better, maybe get a more head-on sort of view here, will simply go in. It will be caught by the heel release, and the heel release goes into a slot. And then, I'm not sure if you can clearly see this. Let's see if I can get a good visual representation here. Alright. Okay, there it is. So you see that little bit of white, just a little bit of white that you can see between the top of the magazine and the extractor. Well, that little bit of clearance is so that when you slam this in, the feed lips of the magazine don't hit the extractor there. And the base of the magazine is basically bottomed out here at the base of the pistol. Right? So if we take a P38 magazine, and I'm going to go ahead, I have a couple of them here, so I have this one here also. I'm going to remove the rubber O-ring from this one. If we just take one as is, one, it's not going to work because we haven't installed the P38 mag release on there. But, secondarily, I guess, this thing, the P38 magazine is longer, so it doesn't bottom out on the frame of the pistol like the stock one does. What ends up happening, let me see if I can get this in view here. Because it doesn't bottom out, the corner of the feed lip hits this sort of corner on the extractor. And I'm not sure if you can hear this. Let's see if I can get it closer here to the camera. That's actually, that clicking is actually hitting that extractor and moving it out of place. So let's see if we can get a more head-on view here. Okay, like that. Boom. So we're not bottomed out, and we're not bottomed out, and it's hitting this piece right here. Okay. So I thought, fine. I've done some reading, some light reading on various forums. If I add the O-ring, we now have clearance there. Okay. And I tested it and it feeds. And so then I was confident, okay, let's remove the heel release and let's put the P38 release on. So I have a P38 release here. There it is. And this was kind of my first sign that this might not be an ideal solution. And that's that the removal of the original heel release on this version 4 is quite difficult. But installing the P38 release wasn't really that big of a deal, and even removing it wasn't so much of a chore. If I can just get this here. I just want to make sure, again, I don't mess up the extractor and that I'm supporting the frame as I'm trying to do all this. Okay. Okay. And I suppose another concern might be deforming the channel where these springs are. Sort of trying to get this to go off. Alright, so I've got the pin out. I've got my punch in here. Let me show you that just so that you can kind of see what I've done. When I pull the punch out, again, making sure I support the frame and prevent the spring from just flying off into the ether. Getting the P38 mag release here. Let me try to get it in. All right. Come on. All right. So just like that, that went in real easy. Not a big deal. Okay. Now the problem I found is, well, one, there's a small clearance issue that can be overcome with some force when inserting this magazine. So let's go ahead and demonstrate that first. So as you can see there, the O-ring kind of binds up a little bit on the heel release. Not a problem. Just smack it in. Boom, good to go. Well, with this O-ring, we now have a buffer, one, for the smack. And here you can see, if I can get the white in there, boop, that there is now plenty of clearance in regards to the extractor there and the magazine. Okay, so cool, worked great, right? Well, unfortunately, the added leverage that you get and the fact that these grips aren't necessarily made for this heel release, and I'll show you right here. If you put these together, or as close it together as we kind of can here. I'm not sure if that's really visible, but there's like a little sort of ramp that happens there, and that's sort of added so that when you hit the stock heel release, it kind of follows this curve here. Okay, so as you were to hit it, it just kind of follows this curve. There's sort of a little bit of a physical stop. It really sort of prevents you from overturning it. Now, the problem that I found using a P38 mag release here So I'm going to go ahead and put my grips back on. And this does have the potential to damage your grips. You will hear some unpleasant noises if this happens. You will kind of probably be in a small panic because these aren't exactly common pistols. And parts for them are expensive. Even like an aftermarket set of wood grips or something, you're looking at close to $100. So if you mess up your plastic grips here, your Bakelite grips, whatever they are, right, then you might be pretty upset. So here, right, oh, not a big problem that comes out. Well, the problem is that under stress, you may, let's see if I can get a clear visual of that. You may end up overusing this mag release, this heel release, and what ends up happening is, and because you have to exert a little bit of upward pressure to get it to sort of pivot, if you exert too much upward pressure, what ends up happening is it actually unhooks from the frame, and then you'll get a sort of weird twisted looking mag release. And theoretically, you probably won't have a problem with it if you're just going to the range and just using this as sort of a range queen. But if you were to, like, say, be under any sort of stress and you hit this sort of hard and then you pivot, now here you can see that, let's see, and then you pivot, you run the risk of removing it from the two little ears on the frame. And that did happen to me on initial installation and testing. So I put the I had put the slide back on. So there is my P5, right? I'm just gonna put something here to sort of block it so I'm not just hitting the bare metal here. Just use this little bore snake. Let's try to get this all in frame. There you go. Alright, so I'll put my bore snake in there. Okay. And we are clear. I did verify. Pull that trigger. Boom. Comes in. Single action trigger works. Double action trigger works. We're good to go. And I mean, this will cycle rounds. You can load it completely with 9mm, so you can put all 8 rounds in that magazine. You don't have to mill out the follower or anything. And that's specifically because of that rubber O-ring. But again, like I said, immediately I ran into that problem where I depressed a little too much on this heel release and then pivoted, and then it just kind of came out the ears. And then I had some very unpleasant sort of sounds as the metal scraped against the hand guards. I had to be very ginger with it as I took it apart, and then tried to correct that to see if maybe I had just not placed it in there right. And I was able to replicate the issue by just depressing and then pivoting and then being upset. So as you can see, there's quite a bit of play there. You can kind of see through that entire thing. So if my recommendation is, if you're thinking about doing something like this, if you're gonna think that you're gonna use this in any sort of capacity other than it being a range toy, with P38 magazines, one, get these little O-rings that can be 3mm thick, and they are going to be consumable parts, because as you slam it in and out of the or slam it in and past the heel release, it will eventually cut these, and then you'll have to replace them. They're not that expensive. I got mine at Ace Hardware, and they were exactly 3 mil. But yeah, use this at your sort of own discretion. If there was a way to sort of maybe rig something up there so that it would not allow so much play into the pistol here, that would really alleviate the problem. But you know, it is something that exists, and because it exists, someone's going to do that and potentially mess up their grips. And yep, it just happened. So just from that, just from the pressure from my index finger, you can see there that it is tilted off to one side, which means that one of these has come off the ear. It is possible to put it back in, but again, you run the risk of it's going to be scraping against your grips here. So is this viable? I mean, technically yes, if you're very careful, and again, if this is only a range toy. But if you're gonna thinking about using this in any capacity, maybe you want to, like, I'm not even talking offensive. Like, let's say you just want to play around and try to do some qualifications with this thing. So like a course of fire, even something simple that's gonna create enough stress for you to maybe push that in just far enough, like I just did with my index finger, and lift it off the ears. That's gonna be, one, it's gonna be a bad day. You're gonna not finish your course of fire, and two, you're going to potentially damage your grips here. So let's go ahead and see if I can unfuck this. Yep, there we go. Now in that case, it wasn't too much of a problem. There you go, back to vertical. But the second time I replicated that, it was kind of an issue. It didn't go right back into the ears, and yeah, I had to take the grips apart and fix that. So I don't necessarily recommend doing this or going this route. Now there was a forum user that had figured out that you could mill a slot at a specific point on the P38 magazines. This isn't one of them. This is an actual P5 magazine. And I guess the key was to measure from a specific part of the magazine, not from the bottom necessarily, because as you can see, the P38 magazines are a little bit longer. So if you were to measure from the bottom and cut that slot out, you're going to miss it. And then you also have to modify the follower. So the follower has to be slightly shortened, and then also kind of a rounded hole cut off so that it clears that slot so that the magazine catch can go in. From my perusing through ProMag's site, they still make P5 magazines. They're a little pricey at about $35 a piece, but I would rather just buy the ProMag P5 magazines if I'm going to have issues with the pistol anyway. You know, if people are going to talk crap on ProMag, if I'm going to have it running anyway, I'd rather have issues and I could just replace the magazine versus it has issues and I mess up my grips, then I have to wait for new grips. If I'm a stickler for having original equipment, then I'd have to try to source some original P5 grips. And like I said, because they're not very common, parts for this thing can be expensive. When that video came out, I recall that a friend of mine had acquired a P5. I want to say around that time, the time of the video, within a couple years, I think prior of that video. Backpages was still a website, just to kind of give you an example. And they had acquired one of these for something like $350. So they were a cheapest chips fun surplus pistol. Well, now these things command upwards of $1,000, and parts can be just as ridiculous. An original P5 magazine is gonna run you between $100 and $200 nowadays, and parts are non-existent as far as on the secondhand market. So yeah, I don't think this is a great idea. If you absolutely had to, I guess it would be good to have some of these things around so you could have a semi-functional pistol in the event that your original magazine release died, and you know all you could get were P38 parts. Then you'd have something ready and you'd have a couple magazines. But as far as I'm concerned, I think I'm gonna go the route of saving up some, you know, some energy drinks, not buying as many cheeseburgers, and getting myself some aftermarket P5 magazines. So that's my response to the video claiming you can use a P38 heel release and P38 magazines without any issue in the P5. Technically, it can work. Would I recommend it today in 2022 based on the cost of these pistols and their parts? Not really. All right. Have a good day, everyone.